Despite what the Indiana Jones movies might make you think, being an archaeologist isn't always the most exciting job. It's hard, arduous work, and making discoveries is by no means guaranteed. Every now and then, though, you might stumble upon something significant, and that's when the pursuit of ancient knowledge really comes to life. Recently, a team in England fulfilled every archaeologist's dream when they discovered something truly extraordinary. And what they found could have huge repercussions on what we know about history. Ancient necklace unearthed in woman's grave could rewrite medieval history. Levente Benz Balazes was the person responsible for leading this particular dig, which took place not far from a village called Harpole in Northamptonshire, a county in the centre of England. He was in the middle of investigating what seemed to be an old garbage pit on the site when he noticed something interesting in the earth. With his expert intuition, he felt whatever this was worth looking closer at. Back in December 2022, Balazes spoke with UK newspaper The Guardian about this amazing moment in his career. With his voice showing a little emotion as he thought back, he told his interviewer, "I was looking through a suspected rubbish pit when I saw teeth. Then two gold items appeared out of the earth and glinted at me." But why was Balazes quite so overwhelmed by what he'd found in the ground that day? Teeth and a little gold don't necessarily sound like earth-shattering discoveries, exciting though they may have been. Well, to an expert like Balazes, the significance of these things was blindingly apparent, especially once he'd looked more closely at them. The gold was actually a part of a necklace, but it wasn't the only component of it. The jewelry item also included a number of incredible gemstones and glass, all joined elaborately together. It was exquisite, and Balazes had never seen anything quite like it before. In fact, no archaeologist working in Britain had ever found an artifact like this. There are a few other necklaces that are vaguely comparable to this one, though they're nowhere near as high in quality. Probably the best of the bunch is the Desborough necklace, which had been uncovered in the same county as this latest one back in 1860. That sits inside the British Museum these days. But this latest necklace is in another league, and it wasn't alone in this pit. In addition to the teeth, a couple of pots and a dish made of copper were down here, too. And though much of it had decomposed, there were also signs that a skeleton had once lain here. Balazes, it became clear, was excavating a grave. The skeleton belonged to a female who'd been laid to rest here at some point between 630 and 670 AD. But who was this woman? What type of person is buried with a necklace of such incredible quality? Well, that's where it gets super interesting for archaeologists and history buffs. With its 30 pieces comprising a variety of golden coins, gemstones, and glass, this necklace is unquestionably the finest of its kind ever to have been found in Britain. And let's face it, only one type of person could have owned such a thing during their own lifetime. Someone very, very rich. Maybe even someone royal. That possibility is an intriguing one, but even if this woman turns out not to have been royal, the discovery of her resting place is still hugely significant. As Balazes proclaimed to The Guardian, this is the most significant early medieval female burial ever discovered in Britain. It is an archaeologist's dream to find something like this. The necklace really is unparalleled when compared to other items of jewelry from the British medieval period. Its quality is just remarkable. At its center is a pendant shaped like a rectangle, which itself is covered in crosses. The pendant is composed of gold and red garnet, which is a type of precious stone. The exact value of the necklace is a little hard to judge. A similar artifact called the Unearthing pendant has been valued at something close to $200,000 following its discovery in 2014. But seeing as how everyone is proclaiming the necklace from the Harpole Hall to be better than any other, we have to presume it'll be worth a lot more. The experts working on the site later utilized X-ray technology, which revealed even more there than they could see with their eyes. A cross was also in this grave. It turned out a big elaborate one bearing lots of decoration. All in all, the hall has collectively been dubbed the Harpole treasure, in reference to the parish it was found in. As we can see from his words that appeared in The Guardian, Balazes really wasn't afraid to confidently proclaim the gravity of his discovery. "This is a find of international importance," he gushed. This discovery has nudged the course of history, and the impact will get stronger as we investigate this find more deeply. That last point was important because there's much work still to be done. The discovery of the necklace is exciting, but it opens up a whole host of uncertainties, as Balazs has pointed out. These mysterious discoveries pose so many more questions than they answer, he said. There's so much still to discover about what we've found and what it means. The fact such a discovery was made in this particular area was a massive shock to everyone involved. Harpole has never been known for offering up treasures like this. Probably the biggest thing that put it on the map before this was a scarecrow festival, which takes place every year. But in terms of features that might catch the interest of archaeologists, Harpole ostensibly doesn't have much to work with. There are no ancient sites of worship, so far as we can tell. There just isn't anything about the place that ever suggested something so important had been hiding under the surface. Of course, that begs the question as to why Balazs and his team of archaeologists were there in the first place. Well, it's because a housing developer known as the Vistry Group was planning to build in the area. Before they got started, though, officials from the company organized an archaeological dig to check out the site first. Daniel Oliver is a senior member of the Vistry team, and he'd worked alongside archaeologists plenty of times before the work at Harpole got underway. He's especially familiar with a guy named Simon Mortimer, an archaeologist and consultant to the RPS group. They were brought together again for this project, and they both spoke with The Guardian about it all. At one point in the interview, Oliver reflected, "I've worked for Vistry for 19 years, and so I've had a lot of interaction with archaeologists. I'm used to Simon ringing me up in great excitement about pot shards." Upon hearing that, Mortimer seemed to visibly disapprove, which made Oliver correct himself. He joked, "Pot shards are very exciting, of course." Oliver went on to talk about the Harpole excavation, noting that it was instantly clear this was something special. "On the day the team discovered the Harpole treasure, I had 5 missed calls from Simon on my phone. I knew then that this was about more than pot shards. Exciting as pot shards are. So, this ancient woman found in Harpole has caused quite the stir, but who was she? Well, that's not exactly easy to answer, especially when we consider the only part of her that remains are a few bits of her teeth. But even though certainties are difficult to come by, we do have some theories. It seems this woman had been a leader of some Christian sect, and a wealthy one at that. It's possible she had been a princess and the head of an abbey. If this is the case, and this woman really had been a Christian leader, that would be hugely significant. It would, in fact, imply this woman was among the first females on the island of Britain to obtain a senior position within the Christian church. For the experts, that's unquestionably a big deal. Another fascinating aspect of this discovery is what it tells us about the broader state of religion in Britain during this woman's time. The era in question was transitional, as Christianity was competing for dominance against pagan beliefs and practices. This grave shows signs of both traditions. As Mortimer said to The Guardian, "This is a fascinating burial of combined iconography. The burial bling has a distinctly pagan flavor, but the grave is also heavily vested in Christian iconography." Mortimer is rightly delighted with how the dig has gone, albeit a little surprised. As he said in a statement to the press, "This find is truly a once-in-a-lifetime discovery, the sort of thing you read about in textbooks, and not something you expect to see coming out of the ground in front of you." Because it organized the archaeological dig, Vistry could have exercised its right to claim the necklace. The company has opted not to do that, though, and has instead allowed the state to take ownership of the artifact. The hope is that it can be properly preserved and eventually exhibited to the public. Announcing his company's decision to give up the necklace, Oliver said, "Vistry are pleased to confirm that these internationally important artifacts will be gifted to the nation, and any rights to the treasure have been waived. We are very conscious of the legacy that we leave amongst the communities that we build. Having personally seen this treasure on site, I couldn't be more excited to see how much more has been learned already. It is amazing." While speaking to The Guardian, though, Oliver was a little coy when the subject of where the archaeological site actually is came up. "We know the general area, of course, but we don't know the specific spot." Oliver is seeking to keep it that way. He explained, "We don't want people coming with metal detectors. That would be a bit much. For the time being, there's lots of work for the experts to get stuck into. The necklace will be treated and preserved, while any organic elements uncovered from the grave will be analyzed. Who knows what secrets such work might unlock down the line? There are, after all, still lots of details to learn." As Liz Mordew, who serves as an archaeological advisor to Northamptonshire Council, has stated in the wake of the discovery, archaeology is important before development works take place on a piece of land. She said, "This is an exciting find which will shed considerable light on the significance of Northamptonshire in the Saxon period. It also serves as a reminder of the importance of archaeology in the planning and development process." Meanwhile, archaeologists working in Spain made a similarly stunning find in a grave that dated back some 1,500 years. The team were working on the site of an ancient Roman villa, which had already been subject to archaeological investigations in the past. These earlier rounds of excavations didn't uncover everything, though, and these experts had decided to keep investigating. It was this dedication that culminated in the discovery of an elaborate coffin, and it turned out to be a truly spectacular find. This ancient sarcophagus was adorned in shapes and patterns, evidently the result of some intricate carving work long ago. But what did all the markings mean, exactly? Were these specific designs significant? Clearly, the researchers needed to work hard and carefully in order to get to the bottom of these questions, and the dig would result in an eye-opening find, much like the Harpole treasure. The experts eventually managed to trace the coffin back to the 6th century, which was an interesting period in this region of southern Spain. At that time, tribes of Germanic tribes were sweeping through Europe, taking over areas once under the control of the Roman Empire. Often, these people would take existing Roman structures and refashion them for their own uses. This coffin, then, appeared to represent evidence of this exact situation having once occurred in the area. The site had been home to a Roman villa, but it had gone on to become something else entirely. And this shocked the archaeologists, as they weren't expecting a find quite like this. Spain is a fascinating place for historians and archaeologists, particularly for those concerned with ancient Rome. The region was once a pivotal spot within the civilization's sphere of influence, and evidence of that past can be seen throughout the country today. In fact, the area owes much of its present character to the Romans. The Romans arrived on the Iberian Peninsula back in 206 BC and came from the south. They battled with the peoples of the land and eventually overcame them in the area of modern-day Seville. Victory here represented the beginning of the Roman era in the region, which would endure for some 7 centuries. Though the Basques and Celts in Spain's northern regions kept the Romans at bay for many years. That part took until the year 19 BC to finally be conquered, which was almost 200 years since southern Spain had been taken. From this point on, though, the whole swathe of land was firmly under Roman control. The Murcia region of modern Spain was once a really important area for the Romans, as it was abundant in useful raw materials. The place was rich in minerals that were used to forge silver coins, while the area also contained plenty of esparto grass. And this was apparently weaved into a textile. Murcia was also home to abundant sources of nourishment, which was clearly beneficial for the empire. Wheat fields provided grain to help keep soldiers fed, while olive oil and fish sauces were also produced in the area. Aside from that, valuable and useful rocks like marble and sandstone were also mined in Murcia. The Romans extracted a lot from Murcia then, but they also brought their own innovations to the region. Novel farming methods were a particularly notable change, and they transformed the region's landscape. In addition to introducing new ways of working the land, the Romans also built their villas in the area. When we use the word villa, what comes to mind? Well, when it comes to the ancient Romans, it generally refers to one or several buildings raised on agricultural lands. Laborers would normally live in these places and enjoy easy access to work the land. In fact, many ruins of such structures can be found across the south of Spain. By the time of the Roman Empire's greatest strength, the villas throughout the Iberian Peninsula were largely workhouses. That is, laborers lived there and worked the land, while the owners would only visit. Over the following centuries, though, changes within the empire started to have an impact on these properties. The Roman Empire eventually started to disintegrate, and as you might imagine, the inhabitants of Spain felt the impact. Even the more wealthy members of the civilization ran into difficulties, so those running farms had to make changes. Where once they only visited their villas, they now moved in permanently. This, in turn, saw the buildings themselves become more elaborate. One great example of a Roman villa in Spain can be found today at the Los Villaricos archaeological site. This place was apparently built during the 1st century AD, though works continued on it for hundreds of years. Throughout this time, the nature of the villa changed alongside its layout and design. Historians posit that Los Villaricos is a prime example of a Roman villa. Why is that, though? Well, the site apparently has all the hallmarks you'd expect to see. It's split into a residential and working area, with the latter containing buildings used for manufacturing and storage. In this specific place, it was olive oil and wine that were being made. With all the changes experienced on the Los Villaricos site, it can be difficult to fully get to grips with its history. Having said that, experts have identified 4 main phases in its timeline, which makes it a little easier to understand. The first phase takes us back to the middle of the 1st century before ending roughly 100 years later. This period in the history of the Murcia region broadly corresponds with a rise in Roman villas being constructed there. Plenty of other examples of ruins like this have been discovered throughout the area, though none are quite like Los Villaricos. In fact, its scale and highly preserved state are pretty much unparalleled. The next developmental phase of Los Villaricos history is believed to have occurred between the late 2nd and 3rd centuries. During this time, the whole place was completely transformed. Old structures were torn down and new ones were raised, which gave the property the shape we can still see today. This was the peak of Los Villaricos' beauty and functionality, when luxuries such as the thermal baths were installed. The next phase occurred during the 4th century and the beginning of the 5th. Los Villaricos experienced some changes around then, though none were quite as dramatic as the ones seen in the previous phase. New mosaic floors were apparently set down, while the production areas were altered in a way that implies business was declining during this period. The 4th and final developmental phase of this remarkable villa started in the 5th century and ended in the first half of the 6th. This lines up with the point in history when the Roman Empire fell into a state of collapse, reflected in the fact that production on the site apparently ceased around this time. People continued to live in and around the area, though, and major changes had come to the site by this point. The coffin discovered in 2021 by archaeologists at Los Villaricos likely comes from this period in the site's history. When they dated the coffin, the experts found that it came from the 6th century. This was when the empire was failing and Spain was being conquered by Germanic tribes including the Visigoths. Who were the Visigoths, though? Well, this group were the western contingent of the wider group of peoples known as the Goths, with the eastern tribes known as the Ostrogoths. Taken as a whole, the wider tribe were actually pivotal to the Roman Empire's disintegration and the heralding of Europe's medieval period of history. The Goths went on to steamroll across Europe, conquering lands which had once been under Roman control. Areas from the east of the continent all the way down to Spain in the south had fallen into the Goths' sphere of influence. Yes, mainland Europe had suddenly become an entirely different place. Many of the tribes that made up the Gothic culture once practiced a German form of paganism. But then throughout the 5th and 6th centuries they apparently started converting to Christianity. During these earlier centuries of Gothic Christianity, though, people abided by a version of the religion that wasn't accepted by the Romans. From a Roman perspective, the forms of Christianity originally practiced by the Goths were considered to be heretical, according to History.com. Around the 7th century, however, the Visigoths took on Catholicism for themselves. In fact, they even built Catholic churches on the Iberian Peninsula, many of which are still standing up to the present day. It was the Visigoths who eventually moved into the Murcia region and the Los Villaricos site, which the tribe repurposed for themselves. And they transformed the patio area into something much more somber. Apparently, the Visigoths used it as a burial place, which would explain the coffin discovered there by the archaeologists in 2021. Speaking to historian National Geographic, one of the archaeologists involved in the excavation explained the team's work. Rafael González Fernández explained that the experts were working in the section of the site that had been turned into a necropolis by the Visigoths. And it was here that they made their discovery. The team apparently hadn't been anticipating a discovery as impressive as the one they eventually made. In fact, when the experts first came across the coffin, they presumed it was something else like a regular old column. As Gonzalez put it plainly to British newspaper The Times in July 2021, "We weren't expecting this spectacular discovery. If the priceless relic wasn't an ancient column in the ground, then what exactly was it? Well, the discovery turned out to be a sarcophagus, and it was covered in some amazing carvings. The coffin's exterior was adorned with wonderful patterns and shapes, with some taking the form of ivy leaves. But they weren't the most interesting carvings for the archaeologists to ponder. Arguably the most notable shape carved into the lid of this coffin was a Chi-Rho symbol, which has interesting implications. This shape is made by combining the first pair of letters in the Greek language term for Christ. These are Chi, which is denoted by an X shape, and Rho, which looks like a P. Apparently, the Chi-Rho symbol is representative of Jesus' resurrection. The Chi-Rho symbol showed up in numerous works of art dating back to Christianity's earlier days. But perhaps it was the monogram's association with the Roman military that led it to become so commonly seen throughout Europe. Apparently, the Chi-Rho was adopted by the empire's forces after the Emperor Constantine had a vision when he was saying a prayer. The Chi-Rho symbol on the lid of the coffin at Los Villaricos was undoubtedly eye-catching for the experts who'd found it. Though they still had to check what was actually inside the sarcophagus. Unsurprisingly, they found old bones, but interestingly it seems that they belonged to more than one person. We have no idea who the people inside the sarcophagus were, and we may never find out. But the discovery will hopefully add some color to what researchers already know about Los Villaricos' transformation from a Roman agricultural site into a Visigothic burial place. Though the discovery of this coffin was particularly notable for the archaeological community, it wasn't the first burial to be uncovered at the Los Villaricos site. Yet the other finds exhibit different kinds of features. Some are graves composed of stone, while others are made from bricks or pottery. In essence, all these things illustrate the different ways the site was used over the centuries. The remnants of another burial place were actually uncovered at Los Villaricos back in the 1990s. Unfortunately for experts, though, this tomb had clearly been tampered with over the years. People had reportedly stolen stuff from the site, which makes the job of researchers all the more difficult to do. Nonetheless, certain details could be extrapolated from the find, according to Murcia Today. It was clear to experts, for example, that they'd found a tomb for two individuals who were separated by a wall. Little remained of the bodies there aside from a few pieces of bone, but much could still be seen of the stonework decorating the chamber. The sheer variety of the kinds of burials at Los Villaricos really illustrate how much the area changed over the centuries. Much can be deciphered from the study of a culture's burial practices, and Los Villaricos only reinforces the point. With different systems of belief in place at varying points in time, the way in which people were buried there changed. The excavations at Los Villaricos are the culmination of the efforts of many different people from a variety of institutions. The University of Murcia has left a particular mark on the site, though many other archaeologists have also been involved over the years. Yet, it seems that interest in Roman history shows no signs of abating anytime soon. A local councillor spoke to National Geographic about the discovery of the coffin and what comes next for it. Translated from Spanish, Diego J. Baluta commented, "This sarcophagus shows the archaeological power of Los Villaricos and confirms our commitment to the University of Murcia. Undoubtedly, the piece will occupy a preferential place in the Museum of the City of Mula." Thanks for watching, and don't forget to like and subscribe.